Cool, we are live. Welcome, mighty community. We're here, just wait a minute for people to hop on. I know you can see in the description what we'll be talking about today, but we'll kind of get to that in a second. So if you are online, let us know where you're watching from. If you're familiar with this character face-off that we've been doing, you can already start to put your picks in the comments, and we will try to get to it as we go through each of the characters that we're going to talk about. So yeah, just let us know where you're coming from. Let us know who you're voting for, all of those fun things. Cool, I see people are hopping on now. So let's kick off our introductions. So my name is Ashley Kristoff. I am the Mighty's video producer. And Juliette, you go ahead.
I'm Juliette. I'm the mental health editor at The Mighty, and we're so excited to have this discussion with you guys today.
Cool. So Juliette, what are we doing?
So it's Mental Health Awareness Month. Every May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and this one is a little different because obviously we're all in quarantine due to COVID-19. So we wanted to do something a little more fun. We're all stuck at home. A lot of us are watching more TV than normal. So we wanted to do basically a March Madness type ranking. And so we have a bracket. Ashley, I don't know if you can show the bracket, but
wrong one. There we go.
We selected 16 characters, and each day we're kind of whittling it down little by little. And so by the end of the month, we'll be able to pick which fictional character represented mental health the best. And the idea is just that we can have a discussion about representation in pop culture, what TV shows do a good job with representing mental health and which ones don't. So we're on round 2, and we've whittled it down to our final 4, and we just want to have a discussion about the characters in round 2.
Yeah, who won, who lost. We'll kind of jump in with each of these pairings that you see here. Yeah, but let us know if there's any of these pairings. Who do you think won before we get to these pairings? And we'll let you know who did win and who's going to be moving on to the next round. So I'm going to hide this for a second and pull up our first pairing.
So our first pairing is a very beloved, 2 very beloved characters. We have Elsa from Frozen and Katniss from The Hunger Games. So Katniss, if you've never seen The Hunger Games, especially in the books, she has a really good representation of PTSD. We see her struggling with nightmares. She obviously went through a lot of trauma in The Hunger Games, seeing her comrades die and stuff like that. And then Queen Elsa from Frozen, though it doesn't say specifically that she has a mental illness, lots of folks with anxiety and depression relate to her desire to isolate, and just overall think it's a really good depiction of anxiety and depression.
Yeah, and we have members in our community who definitely either see themselves in these characters they've talked about, or I know for some people this was a harder of the couple face-offs that we had this round. But IVK said that Katniss for sure had some PTSD, and it made me feel more human when I watch it, which, when we're talking about representation for mental health, like that's kind of not necessarily the goal, but it's this really good thing is when you can see this character, yourself represented in a character in this very authentic, genuine way. And I think that's what kind of Ivy was saying here, is that she felt very represented by this character, and it wasn't a harmful portrayal of PTSD for her.
Yeah, we had another community member, Devin Z, said he picked The Hunger Games because felt like just the genre was allowed things to be more realistic and show some ugly and raw emotions. Obviously, Elsa is from a Disney movie, and so you're kind of limited in just how many symptoms you can show or how intense they are. So I thought that was a good point as well.
Yeah, and I think something that got brought up at our last event, which I saw kind of reflected in a lot of the Facebook comments, is it is almost really hard to pick when we're mixing genres in such a big way, we know like all of these characters are from different styles of movie, different themes that the movie themselves are tackling, or TV show in this case, or in some cases. So it is, I feel like, a hard decision sometimes, because we do have those genres that are a little heavier and darker, where I would say that's kind of where the Hunger Games falls. And then we have the genres like Disney, which is still meant for kids. So it still has this kind of lighthearted feel, adventure story feel, but still manages to hit on these kind of tough points, which I think is a really cool thing.
So if you didn't vote already, let us know in the comments who you would have picked in this face-off, Katniss or Elsa.
I think I probably would have personally picked Elsa for this one.
Yeah, why?
I think I have that same feeling. I really like both of these characters for mental health reasons. I definitely can kind of relate to some of Katniss's experiences with like the trauma and the kind of fallout of that trauma. I can kind of like really relate to her. But watching Frozen, both Frozen 1 and 2, I just like, it was there. I'm like, I get you. Like, I understand. Like, if I was in your position, I would probably like do all of the same things, whether or not, they're technically harmful behaviors. It's just like that, because that's how I am and that's how I feel. So I think that's why I would pick Elsa, but I think it's more personal preference than it truly is about representing mental health for me.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. The first time I watched Frozen, I was actually babysitting, and I brought the kid, and I ended up crying because I felt like it was such a good representation of like having to conceal. One of the lines she sings is like "conceal, don't feel."
Mm-hmm.
So I related to that a lot. But I think in this round off, I would have wanted to pick Katniss. I know we see in the comments Bonnie said that she would pick Katniss as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really appreciate that both of these characters are strong female characters, and
yes,
they like struggle with stuff, but you definitely don't think that they are weak.
And that's kind of the cool part about these two characters too, is mental health isn't necessarily the problem in the thing, or the thing to be solved for. It's just a part of kind of how this character is dealing with something, or it's how they're kind of approaching. And it shows that, we have Queen Elsa and we have Katniss, who both became leaders in one way or another. And I like that they show that, they show that you can still be very strong. You can still have these amazing moments and these powerful moments and still have mental illness. And that doesn't make you any less than.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, like, I know he's not like part of this, but my one problem with the Harry Potter series is that he goes through just like such incredible trauma, and I don't feel like we see tons and tons of trauma symptoms after. He's generally like pretty consistent throughout, and like we do see like some anger and whatever come out for him, but I feel like with Katniss, like we really see like PTSD from war, because she's like in war.
Yeah, that's such a good point that I never thought about too, because Harry's been dealing with, he lost his parents as a baby, so he doesn't really remember that, but then he remembers like the abuse growing up, and then obviously he goes to Hogwarts, and in his first year there, he's literally fighting like evil. And I feel like in that series, they definitely kind of dismiss some of that anger that you were talking about as like becoming a teenager, whereas I think you're right in that it probably is associated a bit with his experiences growing up, as well as being a teenager, because that's already a hard point to be at.
Yeah. Cool. So I don't see any other comments in the chat. So do you want to move on to the next pairing?
Yeah, let's say who won first.
Oh, yeah. So Katniss won this round. You guys voted on Twitter and Facebook and on our site, and Katniss was the winner.
Okay, let me get the other one ready. Renee said she wants to pick both as well, but would pick Elsa, and Camera said she would pick Katniss.
Nice. Thank you guys for participating. We love
absolutely
what you have to say.
Okay, let me find. There's the next pairing. Let me pop it over here. And sharing screen. Okay, here we go.
So kind of one of the funny things about doing a bracket is you get strange characters getting compared. So this face-off was between the Joker from Joker, so Joaquin Phoenix's version of the Joker, and Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. So Eeyore is the easiest. He's an example of depression. Lots of folks relate to kind of his sad mood, lack of motivation, that kind of thing. And the Joker is a little harder to pin down. He doesn't have like a specific mental illness that we see in the movie, but you know, the movie hints at some psychiatric issues and kind of barriers seeking help when he is trying to get help for his struggles. So yeah. You want to comment on the Joker more, Ashley?
Yeah, I did. I did actually so we did this event last week on Zoom, and between then and now, I actually watched the Joker because my boyfriend wanted to see it. So I'm like, I might as well, so I can talk a little bit better about it. So I did watch it, and when Eeyore was originally paired off, I definitely voted for Eeyore, and I think I'll just say that like I would vote for Eeyore now too. And the reason being, I did like the Joker as like a film, as a concept, as like a cinematic experience, but I didn't feel like it was actually a representation of mental illness as much as it was more of that representation, or like that portraying kind of what happens when you're kind of failed by the system when you do have mental illness. So it definitely seemed more of like a piece that commented more on society and used this kind of lens of this character who they do explain at one point in the movie that he has a neurological disorder. So they don't ever explicitly say mental illness. So it's heavily hinted at through the whole series. So I think that's probably why I would pick Eeyore. But I know that there was a lot of controversy in our community, just one about the Joker in general, but two, just between these two characters. And I just want to read one of these quotes from the community members that was for Joker, actually. Joker, because mental illness is most often masked, especially in front of people whom we don't live with. Breakdowns can happen randomly. Eeyore, on the other hand, is easy to see he is sad and communicates this easily. There is no shifting.
Yeah, that's a great point that kind of similar to the pairing we just did of Katniss and Elsa. There's like a lot more realism that comes from just like a real life character like the Joker. And yeah, they definitely have more flexibility in like exploring kind of scary emotions and stuff like that. I think it is interesting what you were saying earlier, Ashley, about how it's like not a representation of like mental illness as a whole. It's kind of just like kind of a really intense character study of the Joker, not like that he's a very good representation of people's experiences.
Yeah, and Matea said the Joker was way more intense. The schizophrenic side is really intense. They do hint that he does have these kind of hallucination type visions, and he's kind of making up relationships with one of the characters in the films. And Eeyore is a Disney character and does not show other emotions. So I do understand like there is a lot more depth that you can kind of get with these, like Juliette said, character studies versus Disney, which again, we talked about with Elsa. There's still this lightness that kind of has to be there in these Disney movies because they are geared towards kids. But yeah, I think they do a good job on kind of both fronts to get across what they're trying to get across.
Totally. But then there's also, like, for the sake of discussion, it's worth pointing out that although the Joker is like meant to be kind of just like this one person's experience, it is like a very successful movie. And it's like, are we taking enough opportunities to show how mental illness is like not violent? Like the majority of people with mental illness aren't violent. And so if someone who is generally unfamiliar with mental illness only has the Joker as a representation, that's not like the best representation of mental health, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree. I feel like we do get this narrative when something violent happens, and we're very quick to blame mental illness for that violent effect. And I definitely worry that the people who already kind of view it under that lens and then watch something like the Joker, which becomes this kind of pop culture staple, reaffirms that instead of actually looking at the facts and statistics behind kind of some of these more tragic things that they blame on mental illness. And I think that can be damaging if you don't have that perspective or aren't open to that perspective, I should say.
Definitely. I think there was another comment from a community member. Okay, so this is from someone on our site, and they voted for Eeyore because they said he was never motivated by anything ever. I don't even remember him smiling. He wins in my book. Oh, look, Emily Moore shared too that she chose Eeyore because as a kid, when she watched Winnie the Pooh, I related to him and felt inspired that his friends never gave up on him. That's a really great point about how his friends rallied around him, and that is a great representation for kids to know that with the right people around you, like you'll have support.
Absolutely. I think that's like when we're talking about who represented mental health better, right? We could go so many different ways with this. We could go like who portrayed it the most honestly, who did it the most helpful way. And I think that's a really good point for representation. Is the fact that kids can feel represented, right? So not only adults can still feel represented by Eeyore, I think they do, but now we have kids are learning to understand this kind of complex emotion that you can feel, which can be really difficult to put into words at a young age, especially before you really develop that emotional intelligence. So I really like Eeyore as the pick because I think it's just such a helpful representation that can really just like help a lot of people understand what they're going through and put that name to it.
Yeah, and that it's okay to be sad and your friends will love you.
Yes, so. Absolutely.
So in the spirit of that discussion, Eeyore did win this round off. So congrats to Eeyore. He's moving on to round 3. Cool. Do you want to move on to the next one?
Yes.
So this next face-off is a little more evenly matched. It's 2 characters who are fairly realistic portrayals. So one of them is Pat from Silver Linings Playbook, played by Bradley Cooper, and the other is Randall from This Is Us, played by Sterling Brown, I believe. And so Pat from Silver Linings Playbook has bipolar disorder. We see him kind of we see him in therapy after a messy divorce and kind of struggling with symptoms and paranoia and stuff like that. And then in This Is Us, Randall, we see him having panic attacks and having to reach out for support for his anxiety. And so a lot of people really related to that who live with anxiety themselves.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to Randall. I think that's something that show over time, like time and time again, we hear about people really liking This Is Us because of how honest and kind of real it feels. And I know a lot of people have mentioned like that anxiety attack that he had in his office when Kevin came to help him felt really real. And that was a mention from at Trying to Be Hopeful on the Mighty site. I think just a lot of people, that kind of thing we were talking about earlier, where like you feel it, like you get it, like you've been where that character is, you would make those same decisions. I think that's what people feel when they watch Randall, who, if they ever experiencing any heavy anxiety or panic attacks.
Yeah, for sure. I know one of our community members, Kat, said that his portrayal of anxiety really stuck with her for a long time. So I feel like when it comes to representation, like that's what we're looking for, those scenes that really stick with you and make you feel less alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and make you just, yeah, it's so great when you can just kind of, I mean, it's not always great because media can be, like the scenarios in media can be kind of ridiculous sometimes, but it's really great when you can step into a character's shoes, know that they get it, and then it gives you just this whole new lens in which to kind of view the series in, because you can get inside that character's head a little bit more. You can understand why they're making the decisions they're making, for better or for worse. And I think that's what I just really like about Randall's character is you can just get in his head and you're like, okay, yep, I'd process this probably the same way.
Definitely. to show Pat a little bit of love. In Silver Linings Playbook, we could have also put the Tiffany, who is his co-star, the actor who
Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah, Jennifer Lawrence. Thank you.
No problem.
She could have been on the list easily, but we already had her as Katniss, so we went with Pat. But I really like Silver Linings Playbook because it kind of shows not that relationships heal you, but that they can be kind of a really important part of your healing process, and like a way that you can feel less alone. And both of them kind of struggle with mental illness and support each other through that, and kind of come to terms with their own limitations in the context of a relationship, which I feel is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, and I love that Veronica put up that Randall is an incredibly realistic version of mental illness, but this part in particular, the show also does a great job of showing how men have mental illnesses too. Especially like both of these characters are very realistic characters. Again, we were talking about how the Joker may not be quite realistic, but may be more of this kind of like character story. Whereas I feel like these two stories are like, they feel like real people. They feel like any person like you could find on the street or, going through your day-to-day life. And I think that's really cool. And I also really like that Pat was a representation of bipolar disorder, right? We're talking a lot about anxiety, a lot about depression, and we don't talk about bipolar disorder in the media as often as we do those other things, which, I mean, for fair reason. I think anxiety and depression are a lot more common, so a lot more people can relate to those characters, but it is really cool to see these other mental illnesses also portrayed in a realistic light.
For sure. It's also worth mentioning Randall is a person of color struggling with mental illness, which is, in the Black community, mental health can be really stigmatized. And so having not only a Black person, but a Black male struggling with anxiety is really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I know one of our Mighty contributors just has resources for like the Black community for mental health because of the different kind of stigmas that are different there than we see in maybe not people of color. So I really love that as well. We have one more comment here. I think Randall represents anxiety really well. I've had a few panic attacks that were similar to what he felt in the show. The pressure that our parents put on us in this generation is real and can be suffocating at times. Very relatable, Emily.
Yeah. So as you guys probably have guessed by now, Randall did win this face-off. It was pretty unanimous. People really related to his depiction of anxiety.
Cool.
Great. So we had one more face-off this for round 2. And then once we're done, we'll show everyone who is moving on to the next round, so you can start thinking about next week who you'd like to vote for. But our final face-off of round 2 was Jessica Jones versus BoJack Horseman. So if you haven't seen the show, no worries. Jessica Jones is kind of a superhero type show. She's a private investigator who has to kind of go face to face with her abuser because he's the bad guy in the show. And then, so she is a trauma survivor, and it's a really good depiction of just like facing your inner demons while at the same time facing your outer demons too. And then BoJack Horseman is a pretty beloved cult classic, I would say, at this point. But people really love that BoJack portrays depression and anxiety well. He's not like a positive character. He's pretty cynical. He's, he struggles a lot. And I think that people like that kind of, it's kind of like a breath of fresh air to like kind of be a character that's like not altogether likable, but still relatable. So.
Yeah, I love that. I've never seen BoJack Horseman, and I probably will after all of this because I feel like that's how I cope. I just I'm cynical, or I kind of have this dark sense of humor, and I think that's like, for me, that's a very healthy coping mechanism. If I'm not doing that, it means I'm bottling up whatever I'm feeling. So I really like that as well, because I think that's an under talked about coping mechanism that can be kind of healthy if you are doing it, obviously, with people who know who you are and know the kind of humor that you bring out. So I really love that.
Yeah, it's a really great show. I would recommend you watch it, Ashley. But yeah, I like it too because they kind of explore his in like some of the later seasons. They explore his past trauma, especially with his mom. And it just like goes to show how much trauma can impact your mental health struggles as an adult. Um, let's see, we have a comment from Matea. Said Jessica Jones showing her coping with her addiction and with alcohol. She is shattered from the Purple Man and showed PTSD as well.
Yeah, we have a quote here. Jessica Jones was very clearly coping with some serious trauma, and she was finding a way to make it work as a private eye. In the end of the first season, she has a chance to literally battle her trauma. And there's something cathartic about seeing her being able to take her power back and rewrite that narrative for herself. I think that again, I haven't seen this one either, but I think that can be really powerful, especially if you are someone who's had trauma as your history. Like just seeing someone being able to overcome and or fight back against this is just like yeah, I'm there. I feel this. I want that too, you know?
Mm-hmm. We have a lot of strong females in this roundup for sure. So it is very hopeful to see depictions of strong female characters battling trauma and stuff like that, and being strong.
Absolutely. And I really like too, because she's a superhero, right? And we always talk, when we're talking about superheroes, a lot of the times we talk about them being infallible and being already a good person, and then on top of that they have this special ability or power. So I really like that it shows, well, she's still like a person, right? Like she's still part of us. She's just, she's a character who also has some special abilities, right?
Yeah, definitely. Do you guys in the comments have, who would you pick, Jessica Jones or BoJack, if you've seen the shows, and let us know why?
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said about kind of some of the results of these, right? We are seeing, which makes sense to me, some of the shows that are a little bit more popular or a little bit more widely spread or hitting kind of larger demographics are the ones that I feel like are moving forward more. And then the ones that are a little bit more controversial, I feel like if you go to any of the posts we've done on Facebook, you'll see the ones that were like a little more contentious have a little bit more comments trying to like defend their character because of the way that people feel about these representations. So the best like example of that would be like the Joker versus Eeyore, where Eeyore won. He had like kind of this overwhelming margin on Facebook, but the entire comment section was in defense of the Joker. So it's really interesting. While we're getting these comments in, right, but we're seeing these, Eeyore still got this landslide, even though no one kind of defended him, because I felt like it was such a natural fit for that character to make sense in this role. This is a shout out to Juliette's writing, so I'll put it on screen.
Thank you, Edna.
All right. Then I think unless anybody else in the comments has anything additional they want to say about any of these characters, we can jump into what next week's pairings look like. Pull up the bracket.
Great. So when we pull up the bracket, you can see who you can vote for next week. So it's going to be 4 people going to round 3. So we have Katniss versus, I forgot who she's, oh yeah, there she is. Katniss is going up against Eeyore. And then Randall from This Is Us is going to go up against Jessica Jones. So feel free to share in the comments who you think should win the whole enchilada and who you think is going to go on to the next round.
Yeah, I'd love to know what people's predictions are for that final face-off. Who do you think who's gonna, Katniss versus Eeyore and Randall versus Jessica, but who do you think is gonna win the whole thing? I'm very excited to see. I feel like there are some surprises to this bracket for me. So who won? Jessica Jones won.
Oh yeah, Jessica Jones won that final pairing.
Yeah. Cool. that's basically all we had for you guys today. Juliette, is there anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so. If you haven't had a chance to vote, all you have to do is download our app and then join the group called Watch with the Mighty, and I'll be posting the pairings there so you can vote on the Mighty.
In the comments.
Yeah.
So you all can find it. But yeah, you can get ahead of the vote and vote for next week, and make sure too that you're getting your votes in for that final pairing at the end too, since that will be the last one. And we're going to have a conversation about who won and maybe our kind of takes on how they won. So definitely tune in for when that happens.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It was great to chat.
Yeah, this was a great time. Thank you all for bringing in your comments. And yeah, if you have with these new pairings any really strong opinions, we'd love for you to come back to our next event to kind of let us know if you're happy if your character won, or if you are disappointed, or whatever you're kind of feeling about it. Cool. Well, I think that is it then. So thank you all again for coming, and stay mighty.
Bye, guys.